It'll be soon that I will be referred to as a former governor of this great state. So if I could, let me please take this as a last chance to tell you, if you don't already know, that Mary Lindquist is one of the hardest working advocates I know. She knows where she stands. She is absolutely honest. She always has the facts, and you can be absolutely sure she will fight tooth and nail for our children, for our teachers, and our education employees all across our state. And to this rep assembly, I feel the same thing about you. I know that teachers and support professionals go to work every single day and then go home and work some more with only one objective in mind, and that is to educate our children, to teach these young ones how to learn, to teach them what to learn, to teach them that learning doesn't end, that it turns into lifelong learning, to teach them that they are loved, that they are respected, and that they are valued, and to teach them that they too must respect and value others. We can't say it enough. That's why I went to school to become a teacher. It is a noble calling. Now more than ever, we live in an exciting, high-speed, high-tech, hyper-competitive world economy that requires new skills every year of our children if they're going to be able to compete in this global economy. Our whole future, jobs, families, and community all begin with our public schools, with our staff there, and with our teachers. Without you, there are no learners. Without learners, there are no jobs. Without jobs, we have no economy, and we have no community. So thank you. I know what you do. I know that about you. When I leave office, I will continue to be a fiercely loyal public education advocate because of my education, my husband's education, and that of my two daughters, and on or about November 2nd, my first grandchild as well. Thank you. As you might expect, I came tonight, if I could, to talk a little bit about K through 12 and what has happened over the last 8 years. Mary kind of touched on it. I might say I look at it now as kind of the best of times, and boy, I tell you, the worst of times. Right off the bat, I want to say how I feel about something very fundamental. And no one will change my mind, and no one will stop. When I tell them the time has arrived, morally, legally, economically, to finally secure the revenue this state needs to fully fund basic education. We've set the table, we've done their reforms, we've modernized to prepare our children, we've improved transparency and public confidence, but there is one thing that is missing, and we cannot continue to promise education for our children without it, and that is revenue. You know, everything we do in Olympia is about timing. And obviously, during the worst economic time since the Great Depression, citizens and legislators would not raise revenue. But let me be clear, we are on the road to recovery. Now is the time for us to educate our citizens and our legislators about the real need for new revenue in this state. The time is now for them to understand that if we want to keep the ability to educate their children and their grandchildren, there is one thing fundamentally missing, and it cannot be accomplished without it, and that is long-term sustainable funding for our education system in this state. So tonight, if I could, I'd like to first start with some of the good things that we got done, particularly in the good times. But before I do, I want to mention one thing that we did not get done, and I felt very strongly about it. And that is, we did not accept a 20-year-old failed idea called charter schools in the state of Washington. Why would one of the most progressive, innovative states in the country accept a 20-year-old idea that has failed everywhere in the country. Our kids don't need it, our people don't need it, and you don't need it. So I don't want to keep going because I said my piece during the legislative session, but enough about charter schools. When I did take office in 2005, our economy, if you remember back then, was still struggling. We had come out of 9/11. We had had cuts. We were working out of that recession. We had had the dot-com bust. So when I came into office, I truly had as one of my fundamental visions that we really, in this state, had to have an education system that included early learning, K through 12, and higher education, as well as lifelong learning. To sum it up, my vision, and it still remains today, is that I think Washington State has to have the best education system compared to any other state and any other country in the world. We as a state ought to be, we are the most innovative state. In order to keep that up, we've got to have the best education system. That requires high quality, learner-focused, seamless education system from early childhood to postgraduate. It was a tall order when I came into office to think about what we had to do, but I was determined to get done all that I could in the time that I served. So it began with my first budget, and again, we were just recovering, and I remember going home one evening and awakening at 3 a.m. in the morning and saying to myself, if you want to have that education system, you cannot accept the budget as proposed. So I came in the next day and I asked my senior staff, and then I met with legislative leadership, and I asked us to reinstate the estate tax for those wealthy individuals in the state of Washington and dedicate the dollars to the education system in our state. If you recall, it was a controversial subject, and I still am the subject of criticism for it, for which I proudly accept their criticism, by the way. But if you'll recall, we took it to the voters' ballot box, and the voters confirmed it because you, WEA, made it happen. So thank you and congratulations for all your fine work. Mary was exactly right on my promise, and I wanted to deliver, and it was that and a strengthening economy that allowed me to be the first governor to fully fund Initiative 728 and Initiative 732 in that biennial budget. K through 12 class sizes were smaller. Education employees got the pay raises that the voters said they needed and deserved. We all worked together to make it happen. It was a pivotal time for public education in our state. In the 2008 campaign, if you will recall, I recall very distinctly, my same opponent and his colleagues were highly critical of the money that I had spent in my first term in office. What they didn't tell the people of the state of Washington was the bulk of the money was spent on early childhood education, K through 12, and higher education. And what was left was spent on making sure that our kids had health care and that our kids who were the subject of child abuse and neglect were protected. Now, I have, again, no regrets for having spent that money, and shame on them for being critical of the fact that we were stepping up to our responsibility to our children in this state. Of all the people to understand that you got to have kids who feel secure and safe, that the kids have to have access to health care in order for them to be able to learn, it's you. And I can tell you proudly today, Apple Health for Kids, we put in place with our goal of all children having access to health care in Washington State. Today, 97% of the children of Washington State have health care coverage, and I'm very proud of that. When I came in 2005, the Department of Social and Health Services and Child Protective Services was responsible to respond to imminent threats of child abuse or neglect within 20 days. My first session with CPS, I changed that to 24 hours. They struggled. They had trouble. I want you to know just yesterday morning, we had another what we call GMAP session. We are now at 98% across the state of Washington. Kids are safer. The numbers show it. Thank you for your support and all you did to make that happen. In 2005, I convened an entity called Washington Learns. The commission and the subcommittees included some of the best minds across our state, from business to labor to the legislator, and of course, our educators. They laid a real foundation. We were really quite successful in the discussions that we had in Washington Learns. And what came after that, I hope, will continue to keep on happening, and that is the focus really was on a world-class education system that was focused on the students and that was seamless from early childhood education all the way through lifelong learning. Recognition of the importance of early learning, a focus on tomorrow's skills and science, creative thinking, and applied knowledge, better support for students who are challenged by poverty and language, personalizing a student's path through the education system, teacher training in math and science, a leadership academy for our principals. We reorganized and we put in statute the National Board Certification Law, in which we said we increased the bonus to $5,000 for every teacher who gets certification and an additional $5,000 for those who teach in low-performing schools. Thank you. We improved the professional certification, or ProCert, to correct poor implementation and to make the activities required, the second-level professional certificate, meaningful in our state. We made the Professional Educator Standards Board a policy board that led to outstanding practicing educators, and today it is seen as an example around the country. We updated the definition of basic education and said that we had to begin the process of ensuring that we were meeting our constitutional mandate. And surely, last but not least, we all came together in 2007 to win voter approval of a constitutional amendment that required only a simple majority vote for school levies. Congratulations, job well done to each and every one of you. We all worked very hard to carry forward every one of those initiatives. We were determined, not just in the good times, but if we had bad times, that we would continue to do so as well. Let me ask you to look at some of those initiatives. Early learning. You and I both know that babies are born to learn. The years of birth to 8 are critical for our children to build for them the foundation for their futures. Language and communication, thinking, inquisitiveness, and more. We worked within a great public-private partnership called Thrive by 5, and we came together to do something that was unique and forward-thinking across the country, and that was to create our own department of early learning to prepare our children to be ready when they entered kindergarten. We have been recognized now as the second leading state in the country. Harvard has recognized us as the leading state in the country. We have a $60 million race to the top grant. I am very, very proud of the promise that the Department of Early Learning is giving to every one of our young learners and every one of their parents and supporters, because they are the future of what we need in the state of Washington. We then looked to all-day kindergarten. Believing that that really ought to happen. So with limited funds, we began all-day kindergarten implementation, and today in our poorest schools, we are implementing it with a promise that we will have all-day kindergarten across the entire state. Every child ought to enter first grade ready to learn, with behind them a good kindergarten education. Science, technology, engineering, and math. We know that our kids' future really does depend on this. We know that's in part what the global economy is all about. So we began the process of reviewing our standards and redesigned the assessments with input from those who really know best, and that's our educators. We provided additional learning materials and assistance for our struggling students. And importantly, we knew that if we wanted our teachers to have the latest, we had to invest, and so we put $50 million into training our science and math teachers. Navigation 101. We know if our kids begin to think about their future that maybe they'll help by enrolling themselves in the classes that will deliver that future that they want. And we found that to be true. Rather than the man telling them they have to take math, they were saying they had to take math because of what they wanted to do. So with Navigation 101, these students and their parents and their teachers are getting engaged and getting involved, so these kids are ready to either go out and get a job or get a certification or go on to college. So in the good times, our vision did take shape. We raised revenue. We worked very hard to make sure that our kids were ready to succeed in school and to succeed in life. Let me just tell you, I found governing in good times a whole lot better than I found it in bad times. I bet you did too. It's easier when you've got students in your classrooms who are performing at grade level, when your classrooms are the right size, when your job and your pay and your benefits are secure. But in the fall of 2008, we all know the story of what happened because of the greed on Wall Street. We had a worldwide panic on our hands, not seen since the Great Depression. And while we weren't initially hurt by it, when it hit hard. Why? Because we are a sales tax state. And the housing industry is a huge part of our budget, and it was devastated because of the recession. The first thing that we had to do was undo what I had done in the first year in office, and that was suspend 728 and 732. In your schools, you saw increased class sizes. You saw programs eliminated. You saw learning materials cut. You saw jobs lost. You saw cuts in pay and benefits. It's the biggest single disappointment in my career as governor of the state of Washington. In all, we have cut $11 billion in the last 3 years, and we have a $32 billion biennial budget. But during the bad times, we did not give up. We kept pursuing and we kept implementing important pieces of the vision of a learner-focused, world-class, seamless education system. We created the launch year. Many of our seniors are not as challenged in their senior year as they can or should be. And so we said, let's help them. Let's make sure they're getting a start on what they want to do. They can enroll in a certificate program that we are about to implement now in a number of our schools that will make them job ready upon graduation in one of the fastest growing industries in the state of Washington, aerospace, leading these kids to a $90,000 a year job. That, I think, is amazing success. They can go to college ready, rather than taking remedial courses after they graduate. And they can take AP courses that give them college credit, rather than what we've had in the past. You're designing and you're implementing new teacher and principal evaluations that are there to help our teachers and our principals to grow. The systems are a model for the rest of the country who are failing miserably. Why? Because they were designed by you, and they were designed based on science and best practices. So I thank you and I congratulate you. That is important for our teachers, it's important for our students, it's important for our parents, it's important for our taxpayers. Together we're creating collaborative schools, something new, rather than the failed charter schools. Collaborative schools where we say, let's put together deans and schools of education in our state with those schools that are the most challenged in our state for two reasons. One, we can really do something new and innovative that we can ultimately take to scale for those schools that are really challenged, that are low performing. And two, we can take those teachers that are teaching our teachers, we can take those deans, we can put them in classrooms, and we can show them really what it's like on the ground, and out of that, they'll be better teachers of teachers, and our whole system will be enhanced for it. Innovation schools. I tried to tell the Secretary of Education in Washington, D.C., to heck with your charter schools, come look at our innovation schools. We don't have a failure in Washington State. We have 22 and growing. These are pioneering schools. They're schools that are focused, they're successful. Schools like Aviation High School in Highline, Delta in Tri-Cities, Tacoma School of the Arts, the Washington Youth Academy in Bremerton, have spoken every year at their graduation since it started, and it is amazing what happens to our highest risk students when they go to that youth academy. Bar none, every one of our innovation schools have been successful. We shouldn't have been graded on that failed race to the top process on charter schools, but on innovation schools. We have created a state-level Student Achievement Council. This is predominantly for higher education, but it's more than that. It's a way for us to say, let's work together, our K-12 system and our higher education system, again, to create a seamlessness for our children so that when they take that AP course, it works, so that if they don't have to take remedial courses in community colleges to be eligible to go to college, they can get it done in high school. I think this is a promising partnership between K-12 and higher education in the state of Washington. And I couldn't be more proud. I look back with much fondness on what we've been able to accomplish with our national board certification. 945 educators became national board certified teachers this year alone. More than 10%. More than 10% of Washington's teachers, 6,174, have earned national board certification, and we rank now 4th in the nation in the total number. And my friends, I swear we're going to be number 1, and it ain't going to be too far off in the future. Together, we defeated Initiative 1033 in 2009, a property tax cutting measure that would have devastated our schools. Thank you, WEA, for standing up again and making something good happen in the state of Washington. Finally, we passed legislation in 2010, setting forth the structure, the new structure, for a K-12 funding formula that better reflects the needs of a K-12 system today, not one that existed 50 years ago, with an implementation deadline of 2018. In short, we got a lot done, despite the worst recession in the history of the country, only second to the Great Depression. The table is now set for us to continue to build the vision, to have that world-class, learner-focused, seamless education system so critical to our children, to our businesses, and to our economic future. But if we want to fulfill the legislative promise, we are going to need $1 billion, not years from now, not decades from now, but in the next biennial budget to fulfill the promise of basic education in the state of Washington. It is time for us to step up to the responsibility that we as citizens in this state have, and that is a long-term sustainable revenue source. The McCleary case told us the obvious, that we are not meeting our paramount duty in this state. At the beginning of my remarks tonight, I touched on the issue of timing. The time to raise revenue was not, apparently, despite our attempts, in the middle of the Great Recession. First, in 2010, the voters said no to a 2.5-cent tax on a can of soda pop. I got to tell you, I have never been so shocked in my life that they could come in, big business like that, and get our voters to say no to 2.5 cents on a can of pop for 3 years to fund education in the state of Washington. At the same time, I went out there and worked hard with Bill Gates Sr. to say the highest earners ought to pay a little bit more with money dedicated to education. Then to cap it off, we had Initiative 1053 requiring a 2/3 vote to raise revenue in the legislative process. I just have to be honest with you. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get a 2/3 vote in the legislature to raise revenue? It is just shy of absolutely impossible. Now, I know some of you will say, as I have heard others say in the state, just close the tax loopholes. Well, by definition, that is raising taxes. So, in November, I gave a long list of tax loopholes to the legislature to consider. I wanted a down payment on the bill that will come due in 13-15 for education. Do you know how many I got? I got one, and it was half of one. It was a total of $18 million. We got about $990 million or $80 million left to go. The reality is, close the tax loopholes is a challenge and a half. I know for you it's been hard. I know our middle class has seen the damage from what we've had to do. Parents know that their kids are either having the doors to higher education closed on them, or they're seeing a lack of quality in higher education. We chose not to do the latter, but we did have to limit admissions, and unfortunately raise tuition so that the greatest squeeze now on admission to higher education is the middle class. You and I both know that they have seen the consequence when you have too large a class size, particularly in our early classes. And they also know that all-day kindergarten makes a real difference, and they know that we have a fundamental obligation, and it's the right thing to do to fully fund Initiative 732. Now, I believe that if we go out there with as much enthusiasm as you have exhibited in the past on initiatives that you've passed and failed to educate legislators and the citizens of this state that there is no alternative, that we must step up to our civic responsibility because we owe it to our children to be able to compete in the global economy, we will succeed. I believe timing is everything. Now is the time. Not 2 years from now or 5 years from now or another promise. Now is the time. So in the last week of the session, we were able to create a legislative and executive work group to fund or to find a funding mechanism that would meet that criteria. As the bill says, at a minimum, the proposed funding mechanism must support full implementation of our state's definition of basic education. The plan is to be completed by December. It needs to be a real plan, and to make sure that it got the job done, to give no alternative to the legislature. We said, and if you don't identify a new source of revenue to the tune of $1 billion, then you have to identify all the cuts that must be made out of our budget to achieve that. In other words, no excuses. Now, I have to tell you, they can't make those cuts. The last session was the worst session of my life and the worst session anybody can remember. I had a $2 billion problem. They got $1 billion that I didn't have, and they struggled mightily. They had a special session, a regular special, another special, and a special to get it done. So, bottom line, at the end of the day, they can't cut $1 billion. It is impossible. We simply cannot assume that somehow we're going to get this new revenue forecast that is going to meet. There is not an economist, and I met with all of them today, who will tell you that's possible to meet the responsibilities in 13-15. So I ask you to join with me in being honest. I am traveling the state to send the message to legislators and to taxpayers that we must have a new source of revenue, because we cannot have money in the good times, no money in the bad times. We have to have money all the time to meet our obligation to ensure education of our children. I am committed to a real plan. I will continue to speak out on this issue. Our children, our grandchildren, our parents, our businesses need it to succeed. You can't be in the state of Washington and fail to design new medicines that will cure some of our worst dreaded diseases in the world. You can't be a part of putting together the finest airplanes that fly around the globe. You can't be part of a new expanding green economy. You can't be a new educator of tomorrow if we don't have the principals, the staff, and the teachers to ensure our children have what they need to compete for those kinds of jobs. I know I can count on you. I know I can count on you. I know those children can count on you. I know WEA knows best what thus must be done. You defeated 1033. You won the simple majority. we can go out there and we can do this again, and defeat and excuses and promises are over and done. We must win on this issue. So I say thank you, WEA. It's been an honor and a privilege, a humbling experience to serve as governor. In the good times, it was fantastic, and in the bad times, it was most heart-wrenching time of my life. I would never expect to have started as a clerk typist 2 when I graduated from undergraduate school with a passion that was second to none to make this state a greater state, and then to produce budgets that undid 40 years of a career. But that's what I've seen over the last 3 years. I hope the baton that I will pass to my successor will be a baton that says we're on the road to recovery, the worst is over, the best is yet to come. I respect what you stand for. I know you're going to fight and continue to fight for a better Washington. We will continue to fight together to find the right funding mechanism. We'll work to make sure that we realize that vision for our children. We will continue to be committed to every single child in the state of Washington becoming an absolute success, as they should, because you, my friends, are there to love them, respect them, support them, and teach them. Thank you all. God bless you. Thank you.